Believe it or not, there are things we can learn from cancel culture.
It's hard to find anything positive about the cancel culture, and ironically, the cancel culture should be canceled.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
I'm James Weingardner, sitting in for Jerry Lutz, and we're so happy that you have joined us on an important subject, and we hope you won't cancel us before this program is over. We want you to know our panelists, and we're going to let them introduce themselves to you now.
My name is Mel ROBECK. I'm Senior Professor of Church History and Ecumenics at Fuller Theological Seminary, where I also serve the President as a Special Assistant on Ecumenical Relations. I'm also an Assemblies of God minister.
Hi, I'm Rabbi Dan Levin. I serve as Senior Rabbi at Temple Bethel in Boca Raton, Florida.
Hi, I'm Carl TROVALL. I'm Professor of Ethics and History at Concordia University in Austin, Texas, which is affiliated with the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod.
Hi, I'm Tony Matthews, and I'm the Senior Pastor at North Garland Baptist Fellowship in Garland, Texas.
All right, our subject today is about cancel culture. According to one definition, cancel culture is a modern form of ostracism in which someone is thrust out of social or professional circles, whether it be online, on social media, or in person. Those who are subject to this ostracism are said to have been canceled. In a recent article, Matthew Hennessy argues that we have a cancel culture that is out of control and that Generation X is our only hope. One can almost feel the pain coming from Hennessy's pen when he writes, Dumbo, J.K. Rowling, and Dr. Seuss have recently all been on the social justice chopping block. Then he states, it's only a matter of time before Star Wars is canceled. In a world where there is a lot of rhetoric about freedom of speech and importance of being tolerant, how is a nation supposed to deal with the cancel cultural phenomenon? Well, Hennessy believes that it's up to Generation X to cancel the cancel culture. He strongly states that the generation that fought for its right to party, Generation X, should be leading the charge against some millennials. Hennessy describes this group as those who are terrorizing the culture via the social media. Following this statement, he asks Gen Xers why they are not leading the charge, to which he says, the reason is as obvious as it is unacceptable. We're terrified of getting canceled ourselves. As we consider this topic, we're asking our panelists the following questions. 1, are people really afraid to speak out against issues with which they disagree due to fear of being canceled? 2, what advice can the religious community give to the purveyors and promoters of cancel culture? And 3, Hennessy believes that if you voice an unpopular opinion, you could be delisted, deplatformed, and maybe one day soon defenestrated. Cancel culture. Is it really that bad? And we begin our discussion again with Dan.
Thanks. It's so good to be with everybody. I hear that word defenestration. I'm reminded of my 10th grade history teacher, Mrs. Levenbook, who had this very thick German accent and said, if you don't be quiet, I shall defenestrate you. I will throw you out of the window. So cancel culture apparently goes back to my high school years. There is so much to dislike about cancel culture. It breeds intolerance and arrogance and promotes shame. And I think about so many times where I've heard these horrible stories of people coming to speak on university campuses, and they're not even permitted to give the address they were invited to give because they're interrupted or shouted out or disrupted by students. And I abhor all of that. So I just want to stipulate that I think that there is a lot to cancel culture that ought to be canceled. At the same time, I think we have to go a little deeper and say, well, where did this come from? And I think it comes from a few things. One is that for too long, our society tolerated things that should have been eliminated and edited out. So, for example, all of us here as religious leaders know that for decades, religious leaders that would perpetrate horrible things, sexual harassment, sexual assault, were often excused or shunted from position to position. And these are people that in religious life probably should have been canceled. And you think about what does it do to the victims or the survivors of people who have suffered at their hands to see those people continue to be given places of honor, privileges of speaking from prestigious pulpits or wherever it is without having any consequence. And I think that we might all agree that that's wrong. Similarly, I think we've grown in our sensitivity and our understanding of what it is to experience life in the shoes of people who have been in historically marginalized communities. What is it like to be someone of color? What is it like to be someone who's gay? What is it like to be someone who's a new immigrant? What is it like to be someone of female gender who traditionally have been the people who have been pushed to the side? And when we have the opportunity to take the people who've done a lot of the pushing and to say, hey, wait, that's an idea that we ought not be expressing. That's an abusive thing to say. There are certainly important trends that we've seen in our society where we have rightly learned to edit ourselves. I don't call people girls anymore. I speak of them as women because that's a demeaning thing to say. I'm learning to alter my language to be more sensitive. And I think that part of the backlash against cancel culture, and much of it is deserved, is unfortunately allowing a coarseness in our society and an acceptable, because I hate cancel culture, I'm also not going to be sensitive and I'm not going to speak in respectful ways. I'm not going to conduct myself in a respectful way. And I think that that's dangerous. I think there are things that we can learn from this phenomenon while trying to find a path that leads to more inclusivity and respect.
Thank you, Dan. Tony?
Yeah, it's good being here, and I appreciate Dan is my rabbi. And I just have a hard time with cancel culture. I trying to find some good things about it, but there's so many negative things with cancel culture where it just leaves a bad taste in my mouth. I guess some of the main things is when someone speaks his or her mind or gives an opinion on race or politics, and if this cancel culture, whoever they are, they don't like it, they cancel you. They create a movement. They will put pressure on companies to terminate you. People are losing their livelihoods, their jobs. People are losing income, and they're being ostracized by the public because they're speaking their opinion. You know, we live in a world where people think differently, people are different, people have different political views, they have different theological views, and I see this as, this is not going to end well. It's just, you know, firing people for making statements. Folks have built businesses, have invested their lives, years and years into building businesses, and then they say one thing. And even if that comment is wrong, if it's the wrong comment, you know, is it fair to fire them? It's just something doesn't sit well with me with this. And I think that there will be a rising of individuals who will get sick of this, and they're going to cancel the cancel culture. And it might be a good thing to do so.
Thanks, Tony. Carl?
Yeah, this is interesting. I appreciate both of your comments, and I think that there are certain things that people need to be held accountable for. And even when people say certain things that may be disagreeable to other people, I think that they still need to own what they said and either need to say, okay, I didn't mean that and I apologize for what I did say because I actually meant this, or they need to say, no, I'm going to stand by it and I'll be held accountable for what I have. Rather, I just think that canceling, the problem with it is, if it means not holding people accountable, then no, I think people do need to be held accountable in the ways that we hold people accountable. But if it just means that, well, I just disagree with you, so I'm just not going to listen to you anymore because you're just wrong, because I know that I'm right and you're not, that's overstating it, maybe, but that to me is just, that just goes against all the rules of civil discourse. I mean, John Stuart Mill, in his famous essay on liberty, talked about how critical it was that we hear every single opinion, because most of us really aren't really, we need to have every opinion on the table because our chances of being wrong ourselves are so high, right? And so, to me, canceling is actually shutting down free discourse before it even begins. And so, I mean, Voltaire, you know, I disapprove of what you say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it. I still think that that holds. I think there are certain pieces that we need to be careful of, because you can't yell fire in a crowded movie house, right? So it's not an absolute right. But insofar as we're a society, I think we're richer, and when we learn to listen to other people, to have a civil discourse with another person, to ask questions when you disagree, to not shut them down. So that's what
Thanks,
another
Carl.
angle.
Mel?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it just so happens that this morning I had a passage of Scripture that was given to me, which included the Golden Rule: do unto others what you wish that they would do unto you. Cancel culture just ignores that. I think if anybody does this canceling, they are opening themselves up to the possibility of being canceled. If that's, or what they're suggesting is, I want to be canceled too. I mean, that's exactly the way Jesus would probably put it. I think words are cheap, except that when they hurt people, they're not so cheap. They're very expensive. And unfortunately, in our social media age, we have found ways to just talk and just to kind of blurt out whatever's on our mind. It doesn't matter. There are no consequences to it. There's no responsibility for what I have to say or anything like that. But boy, I can sure tear another person apart. And it's okay. It seems to be okay. You know, maybe reality TV has done too much to us. You know, it's not a good thing. But you know, we've also had the idea that these kinds of things have been around for centuries. We didn't call it cancel culture. You know, just a few years ago, we were calling it political correctness. You know, you either were or you were not, and if you were not, then you were in a sense shunned. Prior to that, we called it censorship. You know, nobody in this school can read To Kill a Mockingbird because it portrays a black man in a positive light and a white man defending a black man. What's this all about, you know? So we've always had these kinds of, even go back into the Middle Ages, and, you know, and the Catholic Church had its index of forbidden books. That's a cancel culture, you know? Think even of the Amish, or even in my own denomination, you know, if a pastor falls, they must go under discipline, but our bylaws suggest basically that we shun them. As other pastors, we are not to have anything to do with them until that discipline is complete, or if they fail to do that discipline, we're not to fellowship with them. So we have these kinds of things, but most of them, I think, are built on relationships rather than simply throwing out these ideas and saying that person's terrible and we should not pay attention to them and so forth. So I think it's really important. I think Paul, the Apostle Paul, gives us two passages of Scripture that I really like. One of them comes at the end of 1 Corinthians chapter 12, the very last few words. He says, "And I will now show you a more excellent way." A more excellent way is what I strive for, you know? And then he launches into this chapter 13 in 1 Corinthians, which is all about love. It's all about love. Okay, that is a more excellent way than any of this kind of stuff. And he's got another passage that I really like, and Patsy has it up on the window over the sink in the kitchen. Whatsoever is true, whatsoever is honorable, whatsoever is just, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable, whatever shows excellence, If there's anything worthy of praise, think on these things. That comes from Philippians chapter 4, verse 8. I think I'll let it stand there for a second. I have to think about this a little bit more.
Thank you, Mel. Dan?
So I'm sensitive to a lot of what's been said, and I've seen that cancel culture in the national media sort of on both sides. So there's a writer, Barry Weiss, who famously publicly left the New York Times because she felt that if she didn't subscribe to a particular orthodoxy of the left, that she was not even welcome in the newsroom. Similarly, we're watching in the Republican Party, those who voted to convict the former president are being canceled in the Republican Party, Liz Cheney being the most notable of them. So this is a phenomenon that's not a left-wing thing, it's not a right-wing thing, it's a societal thing. And in some ways, I think that it's a dangerous thing. And if you look back even 2,000 years ago in the Talmud and the rabbinic literature, you see actually several different anecdotes among the rabbis where particular colleagues were canceled. And the terrible things that came from that ripped the community apart. Or there's a famous story about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who was evading a decree from the Romans and hid in a cave for about 10 years. And then he came out of the cave, and anything that he saw that he thought was not appropriately holy, or he would burn it with his eyes. Anything he would look at would burn. And the Holy One says to him, did I take you out of the cave for you to destroy? Go back in that cave and think about it for a year. So the canceller in that case, the Holy One canceled in this famous story in the Talmud. But there are certain things that I think we need to cancel and that we've done a good job canceling. So, for example, there are certain words that used to be prominent in our lingo you can't say anymore, like the N-word and others, good. And people who say those words are canceled. Good. People who promote white supremacy, canceled. Good. People who promote Holocaust denial and other kinds of bigotries, canceled. Good. There are things that I think we can learn from this. But the last thing I would say is that preferable to shunning somebody with hatred is embracing someone with love and understanding. And I'm reminded that several years ago, there was a D.C. city council member who had said something that was an anti-Semitic trope and was roundly castigated for it and condemned. There were people calling for his resignation. And a friend of mine who's a rabbi at a social justice organization in Washington said, no, we have a relationship with this individual. And very quietly and out of the public eye, met with him and said, all right, let me educate you. Let me help you understand why this was an inappropriate thing to say. Took him at night in private on a private tour of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial to help him understand why the anti-Semitic canard that he had said inadvertently was so painful. And he came away from that experience, I get it now, and doesn't promote those kinds of stereotypical canards, and now is a much more effective leader because he was greeted not with cancellation, but with education, with love. And I think that's a far better way of trying to help us move through these divides.
A more excellent way.
Let me quickly say that during the riots and the protests, up in Minnesota, a white person called an African-American cop the N-word. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. So I think this whole cancel culture, because it's just out of control. And when people apologize for saying something or doing something that's wrong, I just don't think they should lose their livelihood behind it.
And they won't. They won't apologize unless there's a relationship. As Dan pointed out, I think all of us know that we are called to relationship. That's what we're called to, is to love one another and to instruct and inform and be uplifting to one another. We all have that duty. I've been thinking lately, we have deeds for cars and we have deeds for house, or titles for cars and deeds for house. And I wonder if we don't need some sort of a piece of paper to tell us that we're also responsible for our neighbors says you're responsible for the person next to you, you're responsible for the anti-Semite next to you, and I'm responsible for this other person. And so let's go to a break and we'll come back in just a second.
We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching. And now, back to you and today's closing statements.
Welcome back. We're glad you're still with us and you haven't canceled us, and we really would like to have you write us. Let us know what you think about this and other programs. Please also let us know what you'd like to hear about in future programs. Time for our summation, and we begin right over here with Mel.
Thank you. I think we opened up this particular episode with Rabbi Levin really setting the stage for us. You know, he really gave us some pros, he gave us some cons, he helped us to understand what cancel culture is and why it's so significant, both in what we can learn from it and in the dangers that it brings to us. And I totally concur with what he did in setting that stage. I think we have often forgot basic civility. The people that are getting canceled, obviously, some of them deserve to be canceled, or at least deserve to be disciplined or shunned, or their words thrown back at them so that they can deal with their own issues. But the fact of the matter is we've forgotten how to engage one another civilly. And I think, much of the social unrest is also brought about in part by the social media problem. And I think that public media also makes a very significant impact on the cancel culture itself. I mean, it's constantly bringing it before us and so forth. Whoever even heard of it 5 years ago? But the reality is that we have forgotten a basic saw that I learned a long time ago in disciplining children, and that is that you discipline in private and you praise in public. And I think that's very consistent with what Paul was trying to say when he told us the kinds of things that we should look for and the more excellent way that's possible with love. So I just think we need to take a time out right now and think about cancel culture and whether it should be canceled.
Thank you, Mel. Carl?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mel. And Dan, I agree. You set up the stage nicely to talk about this. And I think one of the other issues that I have is that given our social media context, that so much of this is passive-aggressive behavior. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's also what's problematic about cancel culture as a term, in that people are taking shots at people without ever having conversations with them, right? And I get it. We have to condemn certain behaviors, certain words, certain kinds of ideas, I think, and we can disagree on that, but we should always be about loving people, even those who do things and say things that we profoundly disagree with. Because at the end, I mean, this goes back to Matthew 18, where Jesus encourages us to go first to the person individually and address the issue, and then bring it out into public, which relates to your child discipline comment.
Thanks, Carl. Tony?
Yeah, great program. I appreciate everybody's comments. What advice can we give to the cancel culture? What goes around comes around. And you have to be very careful with that. Case in point, this young lady, Alexis McCammon, I believe, she was would have been the third black editor-in-chief of a very popular magazine. She said something when she was 17 years old, something derogatory about Asians, and as a result, she's forced out. On the Bachelor, this is a popular show that comes on. This gentleman defended, I guess, one of the contestants who made a mistake when she was younger. He got canceled. I just think we have to be very careful. I thought I would never quote an atheist, but Bill Maher, said something about the millennials, this generation, and I'll quickly read this. It was in the whole context of cancel culture and their ideas. He says that there's a number of countries throughout the world that have tried communism, but millennials think that that doesn't count because they weren't alive. And that it did, but he said it did happen, and there are people around who remembered it. And then he says, so you say you're old and you don't get it. Get what? Marr asked. Abolish the police and the border patrol and capitalism and cancel Lincoln? He said, no, I get it. The problem isn't that I don't get what you're saying or that I'm old. The problem is that your ideas are not smart. Now he used another word that I won't say. And so I think that's a good message to this cancel culture.
Thanks, Tony. Dan?
So I think that you look at folks that are doing the canceling. In some cases, you look at them and it's just, it's not passive aggressive, Carl, it's aggressive. Fair enough. And there's an arrogance that comes from that. At the same time, I'm reminded in our tradition, it says in the book of Deuteronomy, tzedek tzedek tirdof, you shall surely pursue justice. And I think that there's a lot of times where people are trying to activate that because they're so entrenched in what they want to defend and what they know is right, that when they see somebody counter that or assault that, they want to cleanse that. And I appreciate that, but at the same time, I agree that it's the love that really heals. I'm reminded of a very famous case. There was the son of the publisher of Der Stormer, the white supremacist newspaper, that was attending a college campus, and it became known that he was himself a white supremacist. And the Jewish group invited him to spend Sabbath dinner with them repeatedly because he himself had been canceled and shunned. And instead of canceling him, they said, no, bring him in. Mm-hmm. Let him get to know us. And it was through that act of appreciation and understanding that he let go of his white supremacy and embraced a sense of greater love. And I think that, love is perhaps a much more better way.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, all the panelists. Really an important topic that fits right with our charter. The charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America, we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. And now, friends, until next week at the same time and over the very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. May the God of all of us bless all of you.